All right, so this tutorial is going to be on Valor, which is a concept which I introduced in a previous tutorial. I think that one was titled Understanding Valor, Equity, and EV or something like that. So this one will go a little bit deeper into Valor and sort of using Valor to analyze hand histories in a different way. Okay. So learning outcomes for this tutorial. So we're going to discuss the factors influencing Valor and then just use Valor to analyze hand histories. What it says on the tin. All right, so warm up. So does anyone have answers to these 3 questions? If you were at the previous tutorial or remember anything from that tutorial, these questions should be pretty easy for you.
So equity. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Valor is the ability for a hand to value bet on future streets.
Right. Yep. All right, what are the other ones?
George is going to say equity.
Yeah, equity is the amount of the pot that you would expect to win if the hand checks down.
Yeah, and now EV?
EV is the amount you expect to win with your hand, assuming both players are playing optimally.
On average.
It's on average. Even if they're not playing optimally, it would be how much you would expect to win, given they're not playing optimally, and you'd have your strategy against that.
Yeah, take into account all future streets, all future actions, stuff like that.
Yeah. All right, too easy. Okay, so back to the definition. Valor is the ability of a hand to bet or raise a future street for value. All right, so some of the factors influencing Valor. So stack depth. Have it here on the page. So the deeper the stack means that the valor of strong hands like nuttish hands and nuttish draws increases. The hand like middle strength hands and middling draws decrease in valor, and this is because of the threat of overbets using the nuts on later streets. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, right? Yeah. So what do you think if the stack depth is shorter, say in like a 3-bet pot or a 4-bet pot? What is that going to mean?
The valor wouldn't be as high.
Valor wouldn't be as high for which types of hands?
The nuts, because you can't put in that much money, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the valor of nuttish hands goes down, and the valor of the middling but not nutted hands goes up, or at least doesn't go down as much. If you think about it, the weaker but not nutted hands can still value bet the later streets because they're not worried about being overbet later on. Like you can overbet the turn without worry about being overbet the river, etc.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so position. So out of position has more difficulty drawing in position. That's pretty obvious. We know from the 2 videos, draw bluffs, and I think it's titled pot odds and implied odds right now, but I might redo that one. That true implied odds do exist, and it depends a lot on the stack depth, which you know about, as well as position. I know from the draw bluffs video that out of position, if their range has a lot of draws, those draws still need to be protected somehow, right? By checking some very strong hands. So the out of position player needs to adequately defend their checking range in order to maintain the valor of all of their hands.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you have a draw and you check it, if your opponent bets at high frequency, that's going to reduce the value of your draw because you're not going to see the next street and be able to value bet that street if you hit. right? So
Yeah.
imposition doesn't have that problem. They can always check back and see the next street without worrying about being bet into. And imposition also has the idea that they can do things like sacrificing valor on this street with the intention of checking back the next street, right? So you can, when you're in position, construct your range where you put in some the word is thin value bets on this street to check back the next street. So an example might be, which we looked at in the previous tutorial, or was on a king 7-2 or something, overbetting ace king and aces with the intention of checking back. With the intention of checking back the river. So that's how Valor was sacrificed on that street, because you can overbet and then checking back the next street. And you'll see that happens quite a bit. You get a lot of thin value bets moved to the flop, the intention of checking back the turn and then evaluating the river, all that kind of stuff happening. Right, so the imposition player can do that, sacrifice Valor for value, and then check back. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, so that's that bridging that Valor represents. When you sacrifice Valor, you're picking up EV, but losing your ability to necessarily bet on the next street.
Well, yeah, you're not picking up EV, you're just picking up value. You're increasing the size of the pot.
Yeah.
So I understand in position, but for out of position, are you saying you're just when it says like you have to defend your check to maintain your valor? It means you can't do as much thin value betting. Is that pretty much what it is?
Yeah, so the Valor here is talking a lot about draws. Okay, so remember draws have Valor too, right? But if the draws get bet into, then the Valor is going to decrease because it's going to be more difficult for you to see the next street.
But so would you check the draw then, or
So if you had a checking range, so the checking range would contain some draws as well as some non-draws, right? And all of that increases the valor of your draws, right? Because when your draw hits, you need to have some bluffs in order to value bet. But if your draw is bet into, right? So if you have a draw and you check and you face a bet, your valor has decreased in the sense that you would have to fold it.
oh, okay. So okay.
Right. So we're not talking about draws which would always call, but we're talking more about a bunch of sort of weaker draws, which you would check with the intention of folding, but you would much prefer if your opponent checks back and allowing you to see the next street.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thomas, does it ever? Does it make sense to to think about Valor of your range as opposed to a specific hand, or does that come into play?
Well, the definition of valor is for a specific hand, so having a valor of a range doesn't make too much sense.
So I remember in one of the videos you were talking about, retaining Valor for bluffs, and if you're only calling a bet with all of your draws and the draw completes, you're going to lose your ability to bet on that next street because your opponent's always going to fold, and therefore you need to include other bluffs in your range. So that kind of lends me to think a bit of Valor of your range. I don't know, maybe that's not the right way to look at it, but it seemed like you needed to look at some of the other hands in your range.
Yeah. So it's not the it's you increase the valor of all the hands in your range by constructing your range well. So if your range is well constructed, then the valor of all your hands should go up. right? If your range is
Okay.
constructed, then your opponent can exploit you and then reduce the value of all your hands, right? Reduce your ability to value bet the next street, and because of that, your EV goes down.
Right.
So it's not that your range has valor; it's specific hands have valor.
And their valor is a function of how well you construct your range. That's one of the functions that go into it.
Yeah, so that's one of the parts of it, right? How well you constructed your range, and it's a lot more important out of position when you're checking to have that checking range be defended in some way. In terms of like, obviously it can't be too strong because your opponent will never bet, and so you don't win any EV by bluff catching. But it can't be too weak that your opponent always bets, and then your draws lose all of their valor. Right.
Yeah.
Any other questions about this?
Nope.
No, okay, no, yeah, that's good.
All right, so in multi pots, the valor of basically every hand is reduced, right? And this is because of the chance of you being called by the player isn't to your right. Okay, so if you bet and you get called by the player to your right, your valor is pretty good, right? Because the player to your right has all the hands which do the pure bluff catching. But the players to your left might call, which would majorly reduce the valor of basically all the hands in your range because their range is much stronger. And this is especially true if you combine it with other things such as stack depth and being out of position. So if you're out of position, your valor for even quite strong hands would go down because of being called by players other than the guy to your right. And in multi-way pots, especially on the flop, denying equity often becomes more important than trying to maintain your valor, right? A lot of the middling and weak hands in your range, because their valor is so low, you shouldn't worry about trying to maintain a small amount of valor and focus more on betting to prevent your opponents from seeing the next street for free. So in multi-way, often equity denial becomes more important than maintaining valor when you're sort of out of position, as well as in position. But if you're doing stuff out of position, you're betting with the intention of denying equity, preventing your opponents from seeing the next street for free. And this all comes into using a small bet size. You don't have to get everyone to fold. You just have to get everyone to pay to see the next street. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, it makes sense. I understand that.
I think I heard somewhere like are you supposed to do a lot of checking out of position multi-way, or is that only like on the river or something? Or
yeah, in general, you want to be checking a lot out of position multi-way on earlier streets because in position will bet for you, right? Because there's multiple players to bet for you.
Mhm.
So if they're betting for you, why would you want to bet? And then once you get into the river, you're not so worried about. You would be more worried about it checking through and getting to showdown, so you can start betting more. Or if it's sort of like a drawy flop and you want to bet just with the intention of sort of denying equity, then you can do that as well.
Mhm.
But all of this would be using small bet sizes. If you look at Snowy has trouble, I think. Like Snowy's pretty good multi-way, but it still has trouble because like its smallest bet size is a quarter of the pot. And I think if it was given an even smaller bet size, like 10%, it would do a lot better in multi-way spots.
Oh, okay. But so out of position, do you still want to do, if you're supposed to check a lot, that means would you still do the equity denial or just like very like just
Well, it's not even the case that you have to check a lot. You can just like bet very small,
okay,
right?
okay, yeah, okay.
You can check and hope that people behind you bet, right? Which is one thing. Or if you wanted to deny equity, say in like a drawy type flop where you have a lot of hands with that can outdraw other hands, you can just bet very small,
So
right?
so
Like a lot smaller than you might think.
mhm. So how like if like I wanted to say I want to like cap my betting range with just like hands I want equity denial, but then I want to check like the strong hands. I want to go for a check raise. Is that like too crazy?
Well, it seems very exploitable,
Yeah,
right? But the thing is, the multi-way pots,
kind of hard to get exploited, right?
yeah, it's hard to get exploited multi-way pots. So if you're just doing that as an exploiting someone else, exploiting other players who are in aggregate playing pretty poorly against you, then yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
It's tough to get exploited in multi-way pots. That's where you can do like weird stuff pre-flop, with like splitting bet sizes and stuff, even very exploitably and be able to get away with it. So, all right, let's go into the hand histories. All right, who was first? I think Naraman, you were first, but you said something about going away and coming back, so we might discuss yours at the end. If that's all right with you. Okay, so this was
No, it's one of my
hand history. Yep. Okay, so
yeah.
how about you talk about this and let us know your thoughts during this hand.
Okay. So I'm not very familiar with a small blind flat, so I was pretty confused. Like even more so when he talked into me. So yeah, I don't because I guess like if he's playing reasonably, like I maybe he can have a firing range here because it's gonna be very tight and a lot of his range is gonna be like a set. But like yeah, I don't. But pocket nine's my three bet preflop, so I'm really I just don't really know what to think because I'm not familiar with the small blind flat and I'm not familiar with the donking range. So I just called and then on the flop I just like okay I have a decent hand I'm just gonna call. And then when he bets against small and the queen, like yeah, I was very confused because I'm not familiar with this a lot small way flat and the donking range. So I just didn't really know what to do. Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have any comments about this hand?
So I have a comment on. I have been studying the dunking range, how to react to dunks, and the dunks usually come from players that it is usually in strong range, strong betting range. The dunks it could be like a top pair weak kicker for protection, or a draw, or semi bluff. So whatever it is a strong. So when a player is a dunks a lot, so here's how we could approach it. When he dunks, we could defend with a strong part of our range, and if you're gonna have bluffs, it is better to have bluffs with higher equity. So, but in general, it is better to get out of the way or overfold actually when they dunk. Then we can compensate our overfolds when they check by attacking their dunking range with different sizes. Maybe you can, when they check, you can bet your entire range for a quarter, or it depends on the board. But what I have seen is that here in this case, when he dunks, you better to overfold, but it's still five outers are a call, draws are a call, top pairs or over pairs are continue, so they could be raised. So what I'm trying to say is that the strong part of your range can continue versus his dunk, and like you can easily fold pocket jacks here, uh, and then when he checks, you can easily start betting. I don't know, pocket tens, pocket jacks, uh, even any pair over there when they check. So I think it is here is a call on the flop. So on the turn, when he bets again, uh, you don't have much draws here because draws lose value on the turn. So you gotta continue with your bluff catchers slash slow plays, whatever you have. And here you have one of the weakest nines you could have here. I know the top pair has paired again, but maybe you could continue at least with Jack nine, King nine, better nines actually, tens, jacks. But I'm saying tens and jacks are less likely to defend than 9-8 because you have five
Hmm.
outs with 9-8.
Yeah.
I think you could fold the turn.
Is his donk like, is that, let's
think-
like, worst case scenario, if this guy's like a strong player, like, is that something he should do? Like, yeah, that's kind of
All
what
right. What? Okay. So let's talk about that, right? So I assume this guy's like not a fish, which probably is because he's got like a third stack or whatever. I ran a sim. We can talk about the sim later, but let's just assume that he's not
Mhm.
a fish,
Yeah.
and like he's trying to play pretty well. Maybe he just got, maybe he just had a 300 big blind stack and got 240 big blinds in with on the last hand or something. I don't know. So yeah, so if you flat from the small blind,
Mhm.
which is probably a lot more reasonable than you think when the
Sure.
stack size is shorter, right?
Yeah.
Is your range stronger or weaker than the cutoff range?
If I look at, I looked at Snowy yesterday, and I think he might have he. Well, I think my range would actually be stronger. Cause yeah, I think mine would be stronger.
Yeah. Okay. So Snowy doesn't do so well against.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna ask
like,
if Snowy's good.
like Snowy actually does really poorly against players with undefined ranges, like with ranges like in lines that like shouldn't be taken very often. It does really poorly.
Oh, okay.
Right, because it's just playing as itself, right? So when it sees a line which isn't taken very often, it plays in a way that's like trying to exploit an old version of itself, an old weaker version of itself, which, because it doesn't take that line anymore, it's just playing in a way which tries to exploit like a really old version of itself, right? So say if a flat from the small blind is basically signaling Snowy that the player in the small blind is a weak player, and so Snowy plays in a way to try and exploit that weakness. Not that the small blind is actually a very, very sophisticated player, and Snowy has a good counter strategy to it. It's just playing exploitatively. So yeah, so a flat from the small blind should be a good mix of hands. It should look like a subset of the three betting range, which I'll pull up now.
But not with Jack. It can't be with. Will we have Jacks plus in there? Like, probably not, right?
Yeah, it would. If you're having flats, then it would still be a subset, right? So it would still have those hands some of the time, even if it's not. The weights might not be all 100. The weights might all not be the same, right? So some hands might be weighted more than others.
So if he's doing that and he has like a 5%, range, is that reasonable? he might have the edge, right? If he has like 5%.
So it would look like this.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But less of the stronger hands, I guess.
sorry, that's button. It would look like this, right? Except the weights would all be different, right? So it might not all be weighted the same, right?
Yeah.
So it might not all be weighted the same as a 3-bet. So like these hands might be weighted less than these hands, etc.
Yeah.
Okay, so knowing that, is the small one's range going to be stronger or weaker than the cutoff's range on average? What do you think?
I think if
I
he's
think
doing that, he might have the edge.
Yeah, I think he's going to have a stronger range if he bets into the cutoff.
Well, like he's.
I'm talking about whether if he has a stronger range, if it calls preflop.
I think because he has it's a very small percent, and like he might have sixes a lot and stuff like that. So yeah, I think so. I think he would have. I think he might have.
Yeah. So someone does have a stronger range. Similarly, like if button flats, they're in position and they have a stronger range, so you're checking most of the time with them, right? So same sort of idea with small blind out of position. Small blind's still going to have a stronger range than cutoff, right? It's going to look something like this. Okay, and because of that, if the big blind raises and then you fold, like the small blind will have some back raises, which is why they still need aces and kings in their range. And then when the big blind folds, the small blind can lead, right? Because of that range difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so the small blind leads half pot, and then you call, which is totally fine. And then the queen comes, and they bet half pot again, and then is the decision to either call or fold. And I think what Nariman said is pretty good. But I think you're trying to split hairs when you have like 9-8, Jack-8, all that. 9-8, 10-9, Jack-9. They're all pretty much the same. In the grand scheme of things, right? Having one or two differences in the kicker probably isn't going to make too much difference, because they're sort of representing a queen when they do this.
Oh, so is this sizing good? Like, is half pot good here for him?
We'll have a look at the sim.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
All right, so I just gave him. I just gave him this weight at 100%. Right, probably not super accurate because it's undefined. We don't really know what to do, but we can just run a whole bunch of different sims and then get a gist. But here's just one of them. This is a 27 gigabyte sim.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so yeah, that range and your range. All right, so yeah, small blind can lead. Seems okay. Half pot seems okay. All right, this is how you continue. So obviously 9-8 is in there.
Mm-hmm.
Notice how you've got some raises.
Yeah, I would. The 9x raises are kind of crazy. I wouldn't be doing those. Like the
Yeah,
king 9.
so yeah, the 9x, like if you think about it, 9x is the EV of 9x is really low, right? And 9x is pretty close to the bottom of your continuing range, and it blocks 9-9, right? Similarly with 6x, has a good blockers. So look at 8-6. Why is 8-6? Yeah, because it's got draws in two places versus 7-6 doesn't.
And the deuces and threes, that's pretty crazy too.
Yeah, deuces and threes close sometimes.
Yeah.
There could be something to do with, like if you notice here, like 5s is folded.
Mm-hmm.
The 3s and 2s could have something to do with this 5-6 being a bluff, so blocking the 5-6 bluff. Even though it's a bluff that you lose to, it's the little thing. Anyway, oh yeah, also because 8-7, which isn't here anyway.
Yeah.
If 8-7 was here, I'm sure 5-5 would be a fold.
Yeah.
All the time. It's a fold all the time anyway. Anyway, this is in the threes. I don't know. It could be just be that the DV is low, is too low, and exploitable for 0.01 BB. Okay, so thinking about it in terms of Valor, right? So you face a bet.
Yeah.
Okay, and we want to sort of bridge the gap between that Valor and EV, and how you're going to continue against this bet. So what do you think? What do you think the Valor of your 9A is going to be when you face the bet?
It's gonna be low.
Yeah, so it's going to be pretty damn low, right?
Yeah, very
If your
low.
opponent checks the next street, you definitely can't really value bet. So the Valor of the hand is low. What do you think of the Valor of the hand as of hitting a 9 or hitting an 8?
The 9 would be pretty good, but the 8 would be like mediocre.
Yeah, so the 8 would be
Maybe like
it would be alright because they would have the Jack 10.
yeah.
Sometime he has the Jack 10 suited. They might have Jack 10 off in their range. Who knows? Either way, having those 5 out draws against this donk, well, what Naraman said is hard pot donk, continuing with all the 5 outers, is probably the way to go.
Okay.
So yeah, the Valor is pretty low, and so because the Valor is pretty low, you would expect the EV to be pretty low, right? And here the EV is pretty low. The backdoor flush draw is got much higher EV than EV to call than the other hands.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, but yeah, quite a bit too. Yeah, double, more than double.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions about that?
Just one thing in terms of small blind range. I agree with the range that you assume in terms of if you assume he's a good player, but I see 2 signs that we could assume he's a weaker player because first of all, if it is a cash game, he could have like just topped up his stack, but he like play 100 big blind. But
oh yeah, this guy's definitely a fish. I mean, like I totally agree. Like do whatever.
If say then we could like give him a more weaker range that he has no pocket pairs. He could have like ace king because he's too passive, but I don't think he has like queens plus.
Yeah.
Hey Thomas, on the
Yeah.
on the queen turn, what's the turn report look like in terms of the on the flop? I mean,
So
the table. There's a table that you can. There's a table view that I like to look at. I'm not sure if that's the one some of you guys look at.
Yeah. So this one is what I'm talking about.
No, the one that gives a all the different possible turn cards and it shows it's like an equity map.
It is yes.
This one? Is this the one?
No. It is underneath the equity tab bar for some reason. If you go there, I know which one he's talking about. That color codes it, George.
Yeah, the color code one.
It is. I can see it, but I don't know why it is underneath. If you go to the graph, Thomas. No. Just the graph. Yes. Where is yours? It's here. It's so weird.
What version of it? Are we up to 1.1.3 yet? It could be just in 1.1.3 and I haven't updated my program. Anyway.
What I do is I look at that and then I say, okay, well, what cards are good for out of positions range and what cards are not good, and then I look at the actual card and then I try to say, okay, well, that queen, for example, what I would expected to see was that queen of spade is probably good for in positions range. I know you got 9-8 and it's hard to continue with that hand, but in terms of the range you're continuing with, that queen should improve the equity of in position player.
So on the turn report, we'll look at the Queen of Spades. This is what you're saying.
Yeah, so Queen of Spades brings his equity down quite a bit, doesn't it?
Player one, it's 50%. It's like I think he lost like 2%. He lost like 2% or something.
Whereas other cards that are really good for his range, if you scroll up on that turn report, there's a bunch of other cards that are probably good for his range, like maybe an ace or a king or.
This equity, yeah, so obviously an ace is good for out of position, but this equity isn't. It doesn't mean too much, right? This number here doesn't mean too much because, like, when you face a bet here, your equity is 41%, and then you fold, and then the equity of the two ranges goes up comparatively, and then the turn happens. But the turn happens simultaneously when you call. So, yeah, so 48.4 is the equity of in position calling the bet. So if you can think of that as like the average. All the hands, what would there be? 52% would be the average of out of position in terms of equity, but it doesn't like that average doesn't mean too much until you see the turn anyway. So yeah, you can rank all the turn cards by how much equity you have, but doing anything before that is like meaningless. Well, of course, it means something in terms of like your range construction on the flop, but when you get to range construction on the turn, it doesn't mean as much as you would think. The difference between two different turns, like it doesn't matter as much. The equity doesn't matter as much, especially not as much as the EV between two different turns. So the equity doesn't matter, but the EV does, because the EV in like a different turn will impact the EV of the turn that you're playing. Okay, so do we want to look at the Queen of Spades and then the half pot bet, and then here's the 9-8 of clubs. So the EV is so here's indifferent, right? And you would expect that you've got like a pure bluff catcher. Your Valor is very low.
Yeah.
Say for example you called and then like you bricked out. It was a brick, and then they check.
You just check, or is it a bluff? Yeah, I guess it's a bluff.
All right. Yeah. So yeah.
Wow.
Towards the bluff side, I don't know. Having an 80% bluff is kind of odd. But
wait, is he gonna call like ace high?
Yeah, I think that might be the case.
He calls like ace king. Oh wow.
Weaker pairs when after they check, but they have like some stronger pairs as well. That's also going to be jamming. So yeah, it's sort of on the thin value bet side, but that's just on this card, and then like on an 8. I mean, on an 8's check, so an 8 is bad here.
9
because of the Jack 10. 9 would be interesting. Check, or obviously you're going to be betting. What's interesting is that you have less equity with 9-8 against the check on a 9 than on a 3. So that says something about the betting range, right? The checking range, the range which checks. So you've got a lot of equity, and it could just because that this tree is too small to differentiate between different sizes, or it would be a lot more decisive if the tree was bigger, or I ran the DEV lower, or I reran the turn. So there's not as much error. Okay.
What would you think? Like, if he didn't have the overpairs in his range, like maybe just not the overpairs. Would the turn be even more of a call or more of a fold? Because here you have the overpairs, and it's like it's like calling way more than I would on the turn. Yeah, it's kind of like more than half, I think, right?
When you're facing half pot bet, so you do have to call
Quite a bit.
2/3 of the time, right? You have to continue around 2/3 of the time, right? You're only folding alpha as a third, so you want to fold a little bit less than alpha because you're in position. So knowing that you can't overfold, otherwise they're just going to bluff you with everything that they have. Notice that they should be checking a lot. If we're talking about in terms of out of position and competing in position, even though this is sort of a weird spot, talk about it. Here you can see that even though even the out of position has such a tight range, right? They're not betting very often, and this probably is because of the range construction. There isn't as much sort of leeway in terms of like small frequency hands, which could be used more as bluffs, right?
Yeah.
Here there's a bunch of hands at sort of lower frequency, which really increases your ability. It increases the valor of all your hands, right? Having some low frequency, weaker hands will increase the value of all your hands, because you can have this hand when you have this hand, or you can show up with that hand in a weird spot. Similarly here, right, because the range construction isn't as good in terms of not having as many hands. It's probably part of the reason why they're not betting as often as you would think.
Okay.
I notice that they're checking a lot, even though they have quite an equity and sort of range advantage. And then after they check, you're betting into it. So yeah, so you'll see when you see a lot of sims that this in general, right? If you would have checked and they're gonna see bet more than half the time, then checking everything is what sims like to do when deep, right? Not necessarily when short, but definitely when deep, like you are here, right? Even though it's a 13 SPR. Okay. So yeah, talking about the Valor of different hands. Okay, so what do you guys think on this specific board here? The Queen 9-6 is going to be the Valor of like the small blinds over pairs.
It would. I think it would be like okay, because the board can change a lot, right? Like it wouldn't be like very high, I think. Or aces and kings.
It would be as high as if the board were, a rag flop. I mean, there's a lot of turn cards that can change
Yeah.
the value.
Yeah, there's like a lot of. Like, I think anytime a straight completes, like you can't go that crazy, right? If you have aces or kings, and straight's gonna complete a lot of the time, and a flush too.
Yeah. Okay.
So it would just be like I think it would just be like mediocre, maybe.
The overpairs that usually solver chooses to bet are the one that has a heart, like aces with ace of heart.
It's like pretty mixed.
No, it's the other way here with kings, but aces, yeah, kings not so much.
Okay.
So
in general, they cannot be too high because the nut changes on later street easily.
Yeah.
Okay, so well, what do you guys think? The Valor is if out of position bets the other pairs versus if the out of position checks the other pairs.
Can we say in general if a valor of a hand is low but it is a value hand, we should bet on that street right away without like wasting any time? I usually
that's exactly what I'm thinking.
the vulnerable hands that are still good value hands, but
Get value while you can, right?
Yes, because there will be a lot of action killers or the bad cards on later streets. So it is better
Exactly.
to have a large sizing on that street right away. So I could see aces with like no heart could be used in large sizing for this case. Aces like black aces are used in maybe, I don't know if we have twice of the pot sizing possible.
I think it makes.
Yeah, but to that point, I mean, what and the other thing is that because of this board, I mean, if out of position does check with his overpairs, given the drawy nature of the board, it's very likely that in position is going to do the betting for him, and he could set up a check raise scenario and get even more value on the flop.
Yep. So that's a good thought.
I think that is better like in position. Like if you want to like just bet, because if you're in position, you can just check the next street, so it's okay. But like if you bet out of position and then you have to face a bet, so I think that kind of thing. Like I think you talked about that, right? Like the thin value is better in position and out of position, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so all of what you said is true, right? So the valor of like the aces and kings, it goes down a lot once you bet, right? So here out of position, betting sacrifices a lot of your valor, because when they call, you're facing a much tighter range, and that range is basically some made hands, some bluff catches, and a bunch of different draws. And when you bet and one of the draws comes in, it's going to be very difficult for you to continue. So we can have a look at that. So bet, call. Which draw do you guys want?
Let's put a 5.
Okay. Well, the 5 obviously wasn't
What?
as important. I don't think it's probably because there's so little.
7/8.
8-7. Yeah.
8-7 is probably not as significant as you think.
Okay, maybe.
Maybe
No, I have to be the Jack 10, so maybe like an 8.
Yeah, it checks everything on an 8.
The 8's pretty devastating. Because you have like 16 Jack 10s. On a king,
Yeah.
we have like it would be even crazier on a king maybe. Oh, okay.
Well, yeah. I mean, on a king,
Oh, you have like a set, I guess. Okay.
still betting very small. Yeah, you have a set, but you're still betting pretty small.
Mm-hmm.
Like a heart, still betting interesting.
Okay.
The thing is with hearts, right? A lot of people they get scared when the flush comes in and they don't bet, but like it actually becomes pretty important to bet because like even though a flush came in, there's a whole bunch of one heart hands which are in the range which will you want to deny equity from. So like all these one heart hands will still continue, and that outweighs the number of and that outweighs the significance of the flushes. However, that makes sense to you guys.
Mm-hmm. What about like the 8 of hearts? Because then like the straight and the okay. Seven. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it seems like a lot of these straight completing ones, completing like the gut shot between the 8 and the 9, cause a lot of checking from out of position. So yeah, so that's true. So bet call 10. You've got like kings out of position, bet call, and there's like a break. Kings maybe, aces.
Oh, you can still bet again.
Yeah, because it's a break.
Oh, but is imposition check raising the king jack on the turn? Versus your half pot bet. Oh.
Yeah, so that might have something to do with it.
Oh, most of it. Okay.
Raise it, and then aces is a fold. A good chunk of the time. So there was that. Yeah. Okay. So check. Now the interesting lines which a lot of people don't study, right? So check. The check lines are pretty important.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because you're getting close to the river, and valor becomes less important, right? And you more just want to value bet, right? Bet call over bet. Potter.
Okay.
Right. Okay. A lot of what you'll see out of position, the out of position player, what they do a good chunk of the time is check and then check the turn. All right. So you can see obviously this is the line that's taken most often from out of position. Check check.
Yeah.
All right. This is the line that's actually taken most often for both players. Right. Obviously, more than 50% on the flop and more than 50% on the turn. So this is actually the line that is taken most often, and it should be the line that you study the most often. Right. Even though players don't.
That can happen quite a bit in 3-bet pots. Well, maybe not. I mean, I see that often in 3-bet pots where, if the out of position player has ace king or something, he might check it, and then in position checks, and then out of position checks again, hoping to get the showdown.
Yeah. So this showdown focused line, you should study this line a lot because it happens very often, and lines which happen very often impact your EV quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So you should know which hands you should go take this check type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, so do you think are you implying that like aces and kings have more valor as a check? I guess.
So if they check and your opponent checks back, your valor has gone up.
Yeah. And if you bet all of the
so the valor before you make any action is probably okay. And then when you make one of those two actions, you either bet, meaning that you would sacrifice some of your value, sacrifice some of your ability to bet the future straight, if it becomes pretty dicey, for your opponent's bet that goes into the pot, and you can win that bet if you win at showdown, or your opponent folds later. Right. So there's that too, and then there's checking. Right. If your opponent checks back, your valor has gone up because your opponent's range is a lot weaker, and you can value bet on the next street or on the river.
Yeah.
And then there's, this is not valor, but it's still a form of value, checking with the intention of calling your opponent's bet, knowing that you beat some of your opponent's hands. So basically, if you look at the video titled 0-1 Games Extended,
mm-hmm.
I think it's what it's called.
I think it was advanced. Is it advanced 0-1 games?
Don't have an advanced. I have an advanced Ace King King. So this is the one, right? Limit 0-1 Games Extended. Okay, so definitely have a look at this one. Basically, out of position can check with the intention of calling your opponent's bet. And the good thing about check calling with a strong hand is that your opponent's bluffs sort of cancel out the bet that you the bet that you put in, right? So if your opponent's bluffs basically cancel out your bet in the EV equation, right? So you know how it's minus S, right? So you lose your bet. You put your bet into the pot.
Mm-hmm.
The bet that you put into the pot is compensated by your opponent's bluffs. Okay, and so when you have a strong hand, that means that you win the amount that you put in, you win from their bluffs, but you also win extra from your opponent's hands that are weaker than your hand. Your opponent's value bets that are weaker than your hand.
Yeah.
Okay, so the amount that you lose to hands stronger than you is compensated by your opponent's bluffs, and you win hands. So you win chips from your opponent by beating hands in your opponent's value range. So all the hands that you beat in your opponent's value range, you win chips from those hands.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so thinking about that in terms of these overpairs, you can check, and in-position player can bet, and here the amount of EV that you win is because of the weaker hands in the value betting range, and the stronger hands that you lose to are exactly compensated by the bluffs.
Yeah, yeah.
There's another way of looking at it, Thomas, is that if out of position were to bet, then the in position, I mean, his continuing range is going to be stronger. Whereas if out of position checks and in position does the betting for out of position, let's say out of position has the aces, what in position is betting with are bluffs that he's going to be given up with on the turn, and he's left with a range that your ace, your overpair is gonna be able to extract even more value, because it's, you're ahead of a lot of the hands that are remaining. He's going to have to get rid of those bluffs that he bluffed with when he did his betting for you.
So when you check like an overpair here, there's two things that are going on, right? So one is in-position player bets and one is in-position player checks, and the EV of those two lines are going to be different, right? So when your opponent, you say you're out of position in this spot, your opponent checks, and if your opponent checks back, the EV of your overpair goes way up, because your opponent's range is a lot weaker now, right? They don't have very many strong hands left because they would have bet them, right? So your EV goes way up in that line. Okay, and when your opponent bets, your EV is still high, right? And the EV is high because you beat hands in your opponent's value range, right? At least for this street. The amount that you put in, right, the bet that you put in is exactly compensated by the frequency that your opponent is bluffing.
Understand.
And so then so that's why EV is at least 0, and your EV goes above 0 depending on how much of that value range that you beat, right? So the hands that you would have lost to, right? So if you've got kings, right, you lose to your opponent's queens, nines, and sixes. So you lose to those hands, right? And those hands that you lose to are compensated by the bluffs in your opponent's range, right? Because you lose that bet, compensated by those bluffs, and you win the bet of all the weaker hands in your opponent's value range. So like ace queen, you would win that bet. King queen, you would win that bet, right? Those are the value hands. Obviously, it gets a bit more complicated because in the 0-0-1 games, there's no next street, right? That the last street was the last street, and here you're going to have draws and stuff to worry about. But that's sort of the general gist of what's going on. So the EV of your king before you, when you check, right, the checking EV of your king, it's going to be lower in the line when you face the bet, but it's still going to be above 0. And when your opponent checks, it goes way up.
Right.
right? So when you check, you're hoping that your opponent checks because your valor goes way up. Your ability to value bet the next street goes way up because your opponent's range is a lot weaker, right?
Right.
So
Okay.
even that line is going to be quite strong.
Yeah, but
And
if
the
you bet,
other line, if your opponent bets, right, then your valor is going to be reduced because you're going to be checking the turn. Okay.
right.
So if you're going to be checking the turn, you can't value bet that. You can't value bet the turn. If you decide to call, raising is another thing, right? There is
Right.
check raises in here.
But just
You can raise the street, right? And then raising the street also probably sacrifices valor because you lose the ability to value bet the next street.
Okay. So if it goes bet call, you lose valor, you gain value because you're making your opponent put money in the pot. If it goes check call,
Check.
you lose. I'm sorry, but if it goes check, you gain valor. And if it goes check bet call, you don't lose as much valor as if you went bet call, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's three scenarios. One of them is check. The other is bet call. The other is check bet call, right? And in each case, you're losing different amounts of valor, but gaining value on the other hand. So betting you're going to lose valor, but you're going to gain value because you're making your opponent put money in the pot.
Yep.
Okay, I think I'm getting it.
Whoa.
And it all happens at
Pretty cool.
Sorry, what's really cool?
This is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
I never really thought about this. This is.
I never thought about it either. But the weird thing to me is that I'm looking at a board that is draw heavy. So part of me, in game when I'm playing, I'm looking at it, and let's say I've got my overpair, and I'm thinking, what's in the back of my mind is, holy shit, I hope a heart doesn't come, or a 10 or a jack, or some kind of draw completing hand comes. And
then you're just going to bet 100% because you're scared, right? Which is what a lot of players do, and that's why I want to teach you this stuff. So then you guys shouldn't be as scared. Because if you instead of you thinking, oh man, I don't want this to happen, I'm going to bet and hope my opponent puts money in or whatever, to thinking about it in terms of the EV of the different lines, it becomes a lot less scary. It's now, okay, well, there's only this many cards, right? So this valor is just one part of the whole thought process, right? It's a lot harder. When you're doing the thinking at the table, it's a lot harder because you have the emotions right there and then, and maybe you've been playing for a few hours and you're mentally drained. But you should try and practice thinking about this, and it's a lot easier to practice off the table, looking at a sim and thinking about it in terms of valor. But and there's another thing, right? So in Hold'em, there's only going to be 49 different turns, or if you have a hand, there's only going to be 47. But there's going to be 49 different turns and then 48 different rivers for you to worry about, which actually isn't too much, right? It's enough for a sim to solve, so it should be enough for you as a human to think about all the possibilities. If you're playing high level chess, you would calculate 1,000 different positions with pruning, right? So you only focus on the important ones, but you would calculate a few thousand positions without too much difficulty, right? In terms of, you would see the most important ones, sort of group them together, and then you would calculate probably 100 different of the most important positions. And similarly in poker, right? So there's 4 different turns, but a lot of those turns are exactly the same. They're strategically identical.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
And similarly with the rivers, a lot of it's strategically identical. So then you're only looking at maybe 20 different turns we have to worry about, and then think about how your hand plays on those 20 different turns. And then for each of those different turns, you can start to think about how you would play the river as well. So for you guys, if you're if you're not already doing it already, try to think one street ahead when you're playing, right?
Mhm.
Try to think, okay, I have this hand, say on the flop. Okay, I have this hand. What am I going to do with this hand if I take this line and then this line happens and then I have these 47 different turn cards that could come, and then what am I going to do on those?
Yeah.
And it might seem pretty daunting
I
to
do
start off
understand.
with, but you get into the habit of it, right? You can sort of judge between the two different things now. Here you're thinking, here you might have seen going from, oh, I would have bet kings all the time. Look at the sim. Why is it doing these two things?
Mhm.
And now you can think about it differently, right? You can think about, if I bet the kings and they call, then I have to worry about the turn, right? And then Valor makes it a lot easier to condense all that together. All this forward thinking makes it a lot easier to put all this forward thinking together in terms of this one umbrella term of Valor. So you don't have to do all this concrete calculation. You can just think of your Valor as sort of like a general sort of vague term. But it's the thinking about it in terms of Valor and thinking about all the different turns and all the different rivers and what you would do on all the different turns and all the different rivers is the same. So that's why Valor is good at speeding up your thought process, because you don't have to think about all different turns and rivers if you're thinking about it in terms of Valor.
Mhm.
Okay. I just have but because you know how the aces and kings, they're mostly being checked, but they're sometimes being bet, right?
Yep.
Is uh technically the checking EV and then betting EV is the same, right?
Yep.
But the checking one is taken more often because the valor is higher. I think. Does it make sense to say that?
Okay, so you got to think about Valor,
Mm-hmm.
right? How much value you have now before you bet. Okay, and so Valor is like an analog for EV. Okay, it's similar except different because it's only focused on the betting line. But you can think about how all the lines that are taken and how your Valor changes in all those lines. So as we're talking about, if you checked and your opponent checks, your Valor goes way up,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? So EV would go way up. Okay, so in that sense, you can just check and hope your opponent checks, and then your EV becomes very high.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that the valor of betting is more than the valor of checking, because you could check your opponent bets and your value goes down
Oh,
by a
okay.
lot.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
okay.
in some sense, the valor of the two lines is the same.
Like, can we? Is there some way we can link like the action to the valor?
Yeah.
I think that's what might be confusing me right now because like trying to think like if my hand has a lot of valor, does that mean I want to check it or bet it or something or?
Yep. So no, not really. So the valor is an analog for EV. Okay. So it's not going to tell you what the action is, but it can give you an idea about all the actions that you can take, right? Because you sort of know what your EV is for that hand, right? I know the EV is high and the EV is low, right? I know I shouldn't be doing this and I shouldn't be doing that. So here with kings, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it in terms of valor, if you check and then your opponent checks back, your valor is pretty high because your opponent check back your opponent check back range is going to be very weak on average, and so you can value bet a later street with a lot of confidence. But if you bet and your opponent calls, you've sacrificed some of your valor, right? Because on some of the different turns, it's going to be very difficult for you to value bet. Okay.
So can you think of maybe Valor?
And the last one is
go ahead.
if you check and your opponent bets, then you've lost a lot of your valor, right? Because you're never going to be able to value bet the turn because you're going to be checking the turn most of the time.
But do you lose more valor than if you bet originally?
Yes.
Really? Okay.
Right, because you don't have the ability to bet the turn anymore. Okay, because you've been checking your entire range in the turn, so you can't value bet the turn. And then on the river, your opponent has to check back the river. Sorry, your opponent has to check back the turn in order for you to bet the river. If they have to bet the turn, okay, so we're gonna look at it. Check, bet, whatever, brick. Probably not the 3 of diamonds. Check, bet. 7, check, check. All right, so yeah, so the check call line. So the EV of kings is pretty high, 12.5 out of 30, or like 10 out of 30, so a third of the pot, right, in this check call line. So it's a third of the pot getting to the river, or if you check call the second bet, here the EV of the kings is 10% of the pot. It's a pot size bet. Or after the check call, it's around the size of the pot, but the EV of the king of kings when you face the bet on the flop is around a third of the pot. So it's around a third of the pot all the way through. The point is, if you'd called, then your valor goes down because you're basically to 0 because you're always checking the turn, and if you face another bet, you're always checking the river. So the ability for you to value bet that street is 0. So your value goes to 0.
Yeah, I can see that.
But the thing is, your value goes to 0, but you're getting value from weaker hands in your opponent's range because your opponent has bet for you, right? And so when you're doing this check call stuff, your valor is pretty low, but you always call because you beat some of the value you beat some of your opponent's value range. Okay, so by check calling on the flop, you'll lose a lot of your valor, but you gain value from your opponent's weaker hands. And then there's also the check call and then check check, which is right. We said before that if your opponent checks, you can value bet, but that's where your valor is in the check call line. It's in when your opponent checks back the turn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your valor goes down because you can't bet the turn, and if your opponent bets the turn, you can't bet the river. Right, you're not going to be valuing the river, so you don't have any valor in those 2 lines. Sorry, in that line, but you get valor if your opponent checks back the turn, because in a lot of rivers you can bet for value. So that's where your valor is. So you can bet the flop, and then your opponent's range becomes stronger. Okay, so you lost some valor in exchange for chips that your opponent puts in. Okay, the gross of the size of the pot, which you can win if they fold later, or if you win at a showdown. And then on some of the dicier turns, you have to check, or you can get raised, etc. Okay, so what do you guys? Hang on, I'm gonna go talk about. Let's talk about this one. All right. So you guys all happy with this?
Yeah, that was very good.
That was very good. Yeah.
I wanted to move on to George, your hand, and get this in from my other computer. So how about George and Kane? You talk about So George, talk to Kane about this hand, and I'll go get the sim from the other computer. I have less good sim here. I just want to see if the other one's done.
Okay.
All right, so you guys talk, and I'll get the other sim.
Okay, sure. Problem.
Yeah. So this is a 3-bet pot. I'm on the button. I get raised by the small blind, and I guess the decision point that I wanted to talk about was on the flop itself, and I decided to call the small blind continuation bet, but afterwards I tagged this hand because I was wondering whether it might be a better play to raise on the flop, because I do have top pair, top kicker. It's
Yeah.
a draw heavy board, and I'm thinking, might be best to try to get as much value as I can up front. But on the other hand, I could be betting and I could be raising into a stronger range, aces, kings. So in game, when I'm faced with a situation, I try to think to myself, okay, well, if I do decide to call the continuation bet, I think about the turn card and I try to categorize it as to whether it's a good turn card or a bad turn card for the villain's range. And I look at this one and I say, okay, well, a good turn card, good turn cards for villain's range would be, overcards to the queen. And because I'm calling this continuation bet, the equities are going to get a bit closer together. The fact that I called, so I would expect that there's a number of cards that I've listed here, like jacks and sevens down the twos that help bring the equities closer together and improve my range a bit versus the original 3-bet range. And that's why I decided to continue calling. I'm saying, okay, well, that jack doesn't really improve villain's range much, so I can continue to call, and which I do, and then I check it down to the river. But the tag in my mind, and what I'm thinking is that on the flop, should I be raising? And if I do raise, then the whole Valor question comes into play. Okay, well, what am I taking value now? If so, what hands am I taking value from? And is villain going to be putting chips in with a worse hand? So that's kind of my thinking around this. I really don't know what's the best line.
Yeah. Yeah, I looked at his hand. I thought about it for a bit. Yeah, because I think if you raise the flop, small blind probably like from a GTO point of view, I don't think he can fold like king queen. So you get him to stack out with king queen, but he's obviously going to stack out with ace and the kings too, right? So you lose from that. You can probably get it in against a flush draw, like some draws, like like ace 10 of clubs and stuff like that, and you'll be flipping against that. And then if you're calling, like I'm right now I'm not, I think about in Valor, right? I'm just thinking about it just like how I think about hands, which is like So there's that. That's gonna happen if you raise and get it in. If you call, he's probably gonna check king queen somewhere, and then you can just bet. So there's that.
Yeah.
But if you
in game, really, what I what I'm thinking, and it's probably not the best way, but it's typically what I think in game is that, okay, I'm going to continue call. He's obviously 3-bet with a fairly strong range. He's continuing, and my goal here is I'm just going to call down unless obvious draw is complete. And that's usually what I do. So I say, okay, well, if the turn comes a club and it's a big bet, I'll just drop the hand and move on. Or if a straight draw completes, I may very well overfold a bit on this. That's usually my in-game thinking. But then I jump on the solver and say, okay, well, yeah, I am overfolding. Maybe I should have called.
Like, I think the boring answer here is just like you're probably just indifferent. Like, it doesn't really matter if you don't have any reads, obviously.
Yeah. What do you do if I mean, are you calling on the flop or raising, or
like it doesn't for me? I don't know. I probably like it really. I probably call, but I wouldn't. If someone raised it, I wouldn't be like you're spewing. I think you're thinking mostly just indifferent. Like it doesn't matter. I think the thing that why I would call more often is just because the board is going to change often, right? So if you're in position on a board that changes often, generally you just want to play more streets in position.
Right.
Yeah. So like
Right.
that's because like the drawing boards, it's really good for in position because like yeah, you get to act last when the nuts change, right? That's like pretty good.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Because if you're out of position when the board changes a lot, you have to like split your nuts into the check and the bet, and it's like pretty complicated, right? But if you're in position when the board changes a lot, you get to see what he does, and then you can just cap your check already. It doesn't really matter because when you check back in position, either the hand's over or it goes to the next street, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I see what you're saying.
So yeah. So usually on this board,
it's basically leveraging your position, and out of position gets to act first. You get to see what he does.
Yeah.
The draw can complete. He can check, right? And if it checks again on the river, you can value bet.
Mm-hmm. So it's just a lot easier just like splitting your nuts if you're in position.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because obviously when you split your nuts out of position, like you have to think about if I a lot of shit, pretty much.
Yeah.
So here, since like the board would change a lot, in my opinion, I would just call. But I think if you put this in a solver, like I think you could get it. It wouldn't be crazy for you to get this in. Like it wouldn't be like something I've never seen before. I think I just call. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the SPR is, what is it? Yeah, it's probably about 10 or something like that.
Yeah. So if it was like a lower, it would be.
No, it's like a 6. I think the SPR.
Yeah. If it was like lower, yeah. If it was lower, I'll be more inclined to just get it in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think if it was like 3 SPR, I would probably consider just getting it in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's fine. But I wouldn't fall. I wouldn't. If I saw a raise here, I wouldn't be like, "That's this craziest thing I've ever seen." It's like fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you, so on the flop, you're calling, right? Because you're leveraging your position. And what do you, to Thomas's point about thinking a street ahead? I mean,
all right. So if I'm gonna practice that, well, I'm facing a bet. So if I raise,
I mean, if you call, right? Are there hands that you're going to immediately dump on the turn? If the hand comes and you face another bet, I mean, are you going to fold on a club turn?
my ace queen, no. If it's like a 5 of clubs, no. I would fold if he bet turn and river, but not just the turn.
Right. So 5 of clubs changes nothing, which is good for your range, right?
Yeah, I think 5 of clubs maybe. Yeah, 5 of clubs I would not.
I mean, it changes the obvious flush draw, but it doesn't change any of the other hands. Whereas, ace of clubs maybe fold.
Well, you have 2 pairs.
Well, that gives you 2 pair. Yeah, king of clubs.
King of clubs would be like pretty gross. I think maybe we can just fold. Yeah, you can probably just fold the king of clubs for sure. Because you could have like tens of a club. That's a way better call.
Yeah. Okay.
So when you call the bet and he bets again, your Valor is I think it's like I don't know.
Well, I think his Valor is largely intact, right? He can continue betting.
If he has like aces.
All right, good work, guys. I'm just eavesdropping. You guys have been talking, and I like the way you guys have been dissecting the hand. Just another thing, like with Valor, you have to think about the Valor of specific hands. So you can't really say Valor of entire range. You can talk about the Valor of your hand. What Kane said about having a bluff catcher is correct after it goes double barrel, but you might be able to bet the river. Anyway, so we can have a look at the sim. So you guys remember the hand. This is quite a large sim for a 3-bet pot. So it's 27 gigabytes. I've got 5 bet sizes on the flop for both players, 5 bet sizes on the turn for both players, and then like 4 bet sizes on the river for both players, and then 2 raise sizes, 3 raise sizes on the flop. So you can get away with a lot more in 3-bet sims because the ranges are smaller, which is nice. Anyway, I ran it wrong the first time. I misread the stack to pot ratio. and I wanted to put some more sizes in. So that's why I had to run it twice. Okay, so yeah, I have this 10% pot bet size for out of position on all 3 streets, and then in position only has 4 sizes, because I ran the other sim, and in position didn't use the 10%. But anyway, so you can see that for out of position, so not you, out of position actually uses 10% quite a bit, and like the half pot is like not used at all. So in the hand, they use half pot. So we can look at that line, just so you know how to play the hand. Yeah, so the raising, which you were talking about, probably not too bad, right?
Yeah.
Like raising small. Okay, here this is a min raise. Say you raise small.
Oh, I thought he would stack off with king queen. I guess not.
This is the I probably shouldn't put 25% in because it's going to mess up this stuff. Because this is like an illegal move here, right? Anyway, you got to watch that out when you guys put 25% size in. That's illegal. Like why they haven't fixed that? I'm going to email the guy and ask him to fix that. Anyway,
Okay.
because like this should just be
No
34, 34, right? It should just go to 34. Like I don't know. Anyway, illegal moves aside, I don't think it changes the tree too much. Where was I? Raise, and so they call, and it's like a brick. Well, there's some donking, which is interesting, I guess, but it makes more sense in 3-bet pots, right? So you've got some donking there, and then check, and then you bet half pot or whatever. You expect them to jam a lot.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. And then like if it's a brick again, check, and then you can jam, right? So here you're betting for value with sort of near the bottom of your range, expecting your opponent to jam on you, and then you would call because you have pretty good hand, 60% against the shoving range. But that sort of assumes like you're doing it with king queen and what was the bowling of like your value range, like king queen, bet jam, king queen's always a call. Right, same with like 10-9 and stuff. Yeah, weird stuff happens. King 7 with a club, yeah, that all makes sense. Ace 5 with a club, because you have the equity to call, I guess, at that stage, because the SPR was so low. Right, so like this jamming thing happens a lot more when the SPR is low, because like you have to call withdraw with your bluffs, right? Your bluffs, your high equity, like here the flush draws that you bet as like a semi bluff have to call because they have the odds to call. Right, and because of that, these hands here, even though the equity is pretty low, get value from the weaker hands just as much as they lose to the stronger hands, and they sort of cancel each other out. Anyway, so yeah, so thinking about that in terms of Valor here, because the SPR is low, you can get away with that sort of stuff, right? So the Valor of like a non-nut but pretty strong hand is a lot higher than if you're a lot deeper, right? Here with the SPR of 5 or 6, between 5 and 6, having these raises is okay. If the bet's small, then yeah, you can start raising a lot more.
Yeah.
Let's see if they bet big, or here if they bet big enough. Here if they say 3/4 pot it or pot it, the sim would just
You calling more, yeah.
Well, here's you can just shove, but which is interesting. It's the same sort of idea, but here just shoving in order to, as like a weird semi bluff because you sometimes
my
get called by worse.
He stacks off ace king.
Well, they stack
No.
up with all their flush draws, right? So
But even like
I
ace
don't know.
king, yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you can think about it in two ways, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how wide do people stack off in three bet pots. If there was just stack off a flush draw, I mean, I probably would, but ace king is interesting.
That's like
as
the
well.
only crazy. That's like the only crazy one, I guess. Yeah.
Ace king, king 10 with a club. Yeah, maybe.
That's
But
like
because the SPR is so low, this is what happens when you pot it, right? When you pot it, you put so much money in on these flops that you have to call with your draw because you're getting the odds.
yeah.
Anyway, so that's why these small bets are being used quite a bit. But yeah, you can see the difference between the two hands we looked at. The one with a very deep stack, where the other pair is like, the Valor is still good, but you have to be sort of careful. Versus this ace queen you have here, you're facing a bet. Your Valor is still pretty high because the SPR is so low. You can just get it in and still be okay.
But the frequencies are more checking, right? It's more of a, well, I'm sorry, calling.
Yes, yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
right. So if it's a check, it's like I'm betting quite frequently. If it's a small bet, right? So here's a 10% bet, and then you can raise it. Okay, so we can have a look at the line that you played. So bet call, and then Jack of Diamonds.
Yeah.
You can see often that they're going to check on this card, right? Obviously, the card's pretty bad for them. The equity's going down quite a bit.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's like one of the worst ones. Yeah.
It's towards the bottom, right?
Yeah,
It's not great. It's not bad. Yeah, more of the clubs are.
Yeah, I thought that card was good for my range.
It yeah.
Yeah, it's good for your range. Anyway, so they keep betting, as they should some of the time, and then you call, which is okay.
Yeah.
Here's some jams, which is interesting. Like when they bet half pot, if you were to just
Bet half
shove,
pot, yeah.
Oh, you get him off a chop, I guess.
yeah, you shove off at chop some of the time.
And then it's the A7 of club. All the ace highs are just club draws, right? Yeah.
Yeah, all these are clubs. Well, most of the clubs. Some of the clubs, cool.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's like one of those weird things.
And 8 of clubs, it goes check. Yeah.
It could also be because the sim is too small to tell the difference.
But the ace queen suited is raised. Oh, is the ace queen suited jammed, or is it only raised for the small size? Oh, it's only raised.
Right, for the small size. And it's the ones without the flush draw, more interestingly. Anyway, so call, and then an 8, and then it goes check, which is all right. When they check,
yeah,
right, they become pretty capped. So obviously they're going to have some pre-noted hands like here, so they're going to have some boats, but that's actually pretty low frequency.
So there could be some betting of the ace queen there if it's checked.
Maybe we do it as percentage, right? So 3.72%. It's weird because this is on the flop only happens 1% of the time, so obviously not going to be as accurate or precise later on because there's not a big impact on the flop EV. So having accurate turns and rivers probably not so great.
So it's interesting thinking about the on the flop and villain on what I consider is a fairly dry board that he's betting small with a higher frequency, like 16 and 18%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, you'll see this a lot in 3-bet pots, but people don't explore these very small bet sizes in 3-bet pots probably because their computers don't have enough RAM to do it. But yeah, you can run 3-bet pot sims, and you'll see that a lot of these very small bet sizes here. This is a 10% of the pot. bet. Here, this is a quarter of the pot bet. Happen
Right.
quite frequently.
So if you
Right.
if you bet small and in position raises, what's out of position doing with those overpairs?
Yeah, just
Re-raise
getting.
them.
Yeah.
Getting it in.
Yeah, just get it
Okay.
in.
So this is where, without a position, betting small and checking are nearly the same thing, right?
Well, they're not the same thing. Betting small prevents your opponent from seeing the turn for free.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah,
Which
by definition,
is pretty important. Right? Obviously, some hands aren't going to be strong enough. But in a lot of these 3-bet pots, right? Because of the differences in the relative strength of the ranges on the different boards, out of position is going to be betting small to deny equity a lot. Out of position with a relatively tightish, strong range, with the overpairs and stuff, versus in position doesn't have the overpairs, capped at sort of jacks here at low frequency and queen jack a little bit. So the in position player's range definitely does not have as many nuts in it, but being a throw pot, or it doesn't matter as much. Still has quite a bit of ace queen.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, you can bet small, right, to prevent your opponent from seeing the turn for free, right? So basically, the definition of equity denial, betting small is an equity denial bet, which like players don't do. And it's really if you're playing against it, it's actually pretty annoying, right? So they bet. Mm-hmm. You have like a 7-6 and like 7-6 with your 7-6 with diamonds. Oh, I've got a back to flush draw and like a straight draw. Oh, I wanted to see the turn for free. But no, they bet a tenth of the pot. What do I do? And it's like difficult for you to. Well, if you're in position right here, if you had 7-6 of diamonds and they bet a tenth of the pot, you'd probably have an apple in your throat, right? About what to do. So seeing that makes a lot more sense. So you should be trying to incorporate this kind of stuff into your game, 3-betting and then betting very small, because it's okay, because it makes it difficult for your opponent to play against. And if it goes bet call, right? If which you will some of the time and say, yeah, jack of diamonds, why not? Yeah, you're betting everything. If it goes bet call, there's actually a lot of turns where you're betting at a very high frequency. So any ace, any king, any 10, any jack, any queen, like all the Broadway, you're betting a lot suddenly.
Yeah, against the 10%
betting.
Sorry? Against the 10% bet, Emperor just caps itself like really hard, right? I think I saw it. Oh no, no.
Yeah, well, it's a combination. Like, it's not that they cap themselves a lot. They have to raise sort of to try and deny equity from you, right? And then you can reach out.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But yeah, so yeah, basically all these hands are like the nuts compared to your range. Especially compared to your raising range. So all these hands are basically nuts. So why not jam them now?
Yeah.
But if it goes like bet small, raise, and then call, and there's like a relative brick. So like this 7 of clubs is not a brick, 7 of hearts. Still checking everything, right? And then you'd be playing against the raise as if you're playing against any raise being out of position, right? You're just defending. So defend as you would, but their raise does sort of cut themselves. So on a brick, you can start betting at a higher frequency. Here I put the 10% in again, right? In this tree, there's 10% on all 3 streets. So we're gonna have a look at 10%. And like, if you're playing against someone who bets 10% of the pot twice, like you'd probably be pretty annoyed, right? Like, say you had like 10 highs, like, I have a gut shot. I have a gut shot. This is really annoying. Maybe we should just raise, and then you raise, and then you get jammed on, and you're like, oh shit, I've made the wrong play. So Yeah, so
It does have an annoyance factor.
yeah, there's the annoyance factor and there's the GTO factor, and you put those two together and you can exploit guys for a lot of chips. Okay, cool. Yeah, so 10%, 10%, and then overbet jam.
And it's easy again on the
Which
river.
is easy again over, but the 10%, 10% overbet jam is a line which is always fun. Right, you do it with aces and kings, even though it's very very small frequency. But yeah, where is it? Kings and aces using the largest size most of the time. Actually, aces is used a little bit. Kings almost never, but aces is used a little bit in the small size again. But yeah, 10%, 10%, and then 4 times pot jam with the aces is always.
And that's the bet sizing relationship with Valor, right? The smaller you're betting,
so,
the more Valor you retain.
Yeah, so you retain so much Valor with the aces by betting small and not getting raised that you can just jam the river.
Can you jam on a club river?
And we can have a look. Probably not, but that's probably not the best club river. Well, it's not jammed, but
You still bet pretty big. Is that pot?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you're betting small, you expect them to raise you a lot, and then when they don't raise you, they've capped themselves. Sort of similar, like with checking and then calling, or checking and then check. What did I put for 2 hearts? Right, so sort of the same, right? You would overbet jam. It's the same sort of thing, except, all right. So betting small and checking are like mathematically pretty similar, except betting small has the added benefit of denying equity a little bit. So you can play the bet small similarly to if you had checked.
Right. Understand. So it seems like a lot of the art here with Valor is deciding whether to retain your Valor on that street or spend it. I don't know if spending is the right word, but
yeah, spend is okay.
Say, spend it on that street, and the art is making that determination whether you should save it or spend it.
Well, if you have to make a decision, often the expected value of the 2 lines is the same.
Right.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You true. Have a mixed strategy, and so that's why Valor can help you make these decisions. Well, it's pretty obvious that I should be bet, right? Because Valor's so high, even if I bet and check, it doesn't make too much sense, unless I want to check raise. Then yeah, the EV is going to be pretty similar. So with a hand like the aces, say on aces is being bet pretty big on the flop, but say like queens, right? Top set goes for the small bet. The 2 smallest bet sizes, 10% and the thing, right? It's trying to it's hoping to get raised, and then flats against the raise. Anyway, is it the case with queens that say you ran the sim without these very small bet sizes, right? Queens would always check, or it might sometimes be using like a very small frequency into the bigger sizes, but most of the time queens would always check. And so you hear like people when they're analyzing hands, oh, you should check top set here because my sim did this, But no, I've ran a sim 3 times bigger than yours, and I see that queens bets 10%. So there's more to it than a lot of the sims that are floating around. Okay, you're on a bigger sim, you can see more stuff that you can do and you should do, right? Anyway, yeah. So you bet small. It's very similar to checking, except you get to deny that bit of equity, right? You get to prevent them from seeing the turn for free by checking back.
Yeah.
It probably isn't too big of a deal because the hands that they're folding right? It's nice that they fold some backdoor flush draws, right? So it's nice that they fold those hands, but you get some value from like diamonds and other draws when you bet very small. So you can use that with like a nines, bet very small, and then going into the turn, like say it's a brick, another brick, right? Then you can start checking. Two, the brick. Going to bet quarter pot, sevens. Same sort of idea, betting small.
Yeah.
If you get raised, you can flat. A lot of because you queens specifically because like queens and jacks specifically because you block so much. So yeah, thinking about in terms of valor, right? So with nines, okay. So let's have a look at nines, which is not the hand that you had. Are you pretty happy with the hand that you had, or do you want to talk a bit
very
more
much
about
so.
that? Yeah. Okay, we can talk about some other hands. Okay, so let's think about nines. Like how would you play nines here, right? So this is out of position. We talk about out of position because I think out of position is a bit more interesting, and we haven't really talked as much about about pots out of position. We've been talking a lot about in position stuff, but out of position, through that pot, you can see how much more complicated it is than in position. And because it's so complicated, you need to think about it a lot more. All right, so nines in terms of valor. So you can see in the sim, you see the checking or betting small. All right. So what do we think? What do you think about the valor of pocket nines, sort of in general?
Well, I think
It's like very low.
the valor is low. Yeah. I mean, there are some turn cards that can put draws in place. But in general, they're low.
Like it has to improve for the value to get higher, right?
Yep. Well, yeah, it has to improve.
Like maybe like a weird line. If it's like a 3 and a 2, maybe you can value bet it for a small size. But it has to be like check down or something.
Okay, so yeah, let's have a look at the check down line. So check. It's a brick.
Like a very bricky, yeah.
Check, and it's on the brick.
Yeah, you can value. Yeah, at least for like the smaller size.
And now you're value betting for a small size.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where the valor is going to be with your nines, I guess. Where's 9 all the way down here?
I guess
that's where the valor is going to be.
And you can still do that if you bet like the 10% and it goes check or something.
Yep. So 10% call.
And then like a check or something.
You maybe can go check, right, and then bet very small.
Yeah.
Or you can bet small and they call, and then you can either check or bet small again, right? Yeah. So, remember, out of position, using small bets. Small bets are still value bets, right? Well, they can value bet a lot thinner, a lot less equity against the calling range, using a small bet, because if you check and then face a bigger bet or check and face any bet, you'll be indifferent because you have to fold. So betting small and getting called by some worse hands can often offset the amount that you lose to stronger hands. So that's sort of what's going on here. So with nines, you have like a combination of value betting, right? So you either spend, which is a good word, I guess, spend your valor by value betting very small, right, on the flop and the turn, and then check the river, which is what's happened on these 2 bricks, right? Small, and then 2, and then it's like checked half the time. I guess you could have a look at eights too. Eights is similarly.
Same thing. Yeah.
You know, I actually see this line quite a bit. I'm not. In some of my games, people actually do this. They bet they like bet like one big blind.
Yeah, well, this is 1.7, so 1.7 and 1 is not different. Yeah, like
It's actually
it feels really annoying when you're playing against, right? You throw a pot, the pot's like 20 big blinds, and then they bet 1, and you're like,
And what's in position's betting frequency after you check the turn? Like, let's say with the nines.
Nines isn't doing it. I haven't put the small size in, but the quarter pot wasn't used, so why would the small size be used? It's mainly because, like, if you bet and you face a check jam, it's really annoying when you have nines. So nines wouldn't do it, but if it goes check, 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 and then you can see it's being bet sometimes, but
Yeah,
it's still being checked
I
back.
mean,
Well, it's got 85% equity, but it's still being checked.
I mean, if out of position bets his nines, and then the brick comes 7, and then out of position checks, I'm just curious what's in position's betting frequency after the check.
Okay, so bet, call, check, betting around 30, 40%.
Okay. Now, I guess you're obviously folding the nines there when you get the.
Yeah. Well, when
yeah.
you're different, but yeah.
very yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I guess one of the Valor considerations when you're betting the nines on the flop is that you could improve to a set, and then if you check.
Yeah, I mean, you could improve to a set. You could improve to a backdoor straight.
Yeah.
You could improve to a backdoor flush if you have a club, but that's not super important. Like the Valor, the biggest part of your Valor, well, that's going to be a considerable part of your Valor, right? If you improve, but the other part of your Valor is in the check line. You can always value bet the river, and so knowing that that's a part of your Valor, you can spend it on an earlier street by betting very small out of position, which you can do.
Right.
If it goes check, the reason why you can bet the river is because of that small bet idea, and here you can spend some of that by betting small and then try and deny equity while simultaneously getting your opponent to cap their range, and then betting small the next street, and then betting small to hope to get showdown, which is what was the name? Siva was made a joke about that. I don't know.
The cheap showdown thing, yeah.
Yeah, the cheap showdown thing.
Where you're never good.
Well, I mean, here you're actually here. Yeah, I mean, like it's not a cheap showdown when you're never good. It's a showdown when you're good half the time.
Is there Valor for draws?
Yeah, so we talked about draws in the last one, where you have to bet a variety of different things, right? So we want to look at the Valor of the draws. Which draws do you want to? Let's have a look at some club draws. Let's have a look at some flush draws, right?
Yeah.
So the flush draws are pretty down mix, right? So we can have a look at Ace King of clubs. So let's have a look at that for out of position.
Picked in the small sizes, yeah.
Yeah, just picking small sizes. Ace King, and then like the weaker ones can be used in the bigger sizes. 8, 7.
So
yeah, so in the smaller sims, what you see is that Ace King is checked, and the smaller ones draws tend to be bet. This is because you just have more bet sizes in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. See. Well, when you're playing, you want to be playing close to GTO, and if like a bigger tree says you can bet at half the time with a very small size versus checking all the time with a big size, then against your opponent, you want to be taking these lines more, right?
Yeah, agreed.
You end up sacrificing a little bit of EV by simplifying too much. Okay, so we can look at Ace King of clubs. So yeah, so that betting small. All right, so bet small, and then call. All right, and it's a brick, right? So you would expect the Valor of your Ace King to go down. Here on the flop, it's got 70% equity, right? So like a raw flush draw, right? It's going to have good equity against any hand So the Valor is obviously when you hit your draw or when you improve in some way, either as a flush or straight or to a top pair, top picker, and then you can value bet, right? Yeah. So all of these like draws with enormous amounts of equity, when they bet the flop, they're actually value bets, but they're not value bets in the sense that, oh, I have a stronger hand than you right now. It's a Valor bet, right? You're thinking that I'm betting now. I want you to grow. I want my opponents to put money in the pot because on all these turns and rivers, it's so likely that I'm going to improve. Yeah, I'm going to win that bigger pot at showdown, right? Mm-hmm. It's different if it's some for you guys, it might just totally make sense, but it might not. Right here, you've got a hand that isn't made yet, and it's not really a value bet because value bet says you've got a stronger hand, or it technically is a value bet, but it's not a value bet in the sense that you have a made hand and you're trying to get value from worse hands. You have here a hand with so much valor, right? A hand that's so likely to outdraw any of your opponent's hands that when you bet, you're betting hoping that they call, pretty much. Yeah. You're betting hoping that they don't raise you, right? That's what's going on. Okay, so bet call. If you brick, obviously your equity goes down, so your value is going to go down as well, right? Mm-hmm. So you can just, I guess, turn it into a semi-bluff then.
What if the turn card completes a straight draw? You know, like you're saying, retaining valor by having other bluffs in your range. What's that do?
Well, this tends bet a lot.
Yeah, so the ace, the king, and the 10 were bet a lot, and that's probably because like all the ace king is like a lot of the small bet size has a lot of ace king in it.
No, that's a bad example I gave. I'm just thinking of rather than if it was ace king, if it was a another flush draw where the turn card completed a straight draw in your range.
Okay, you can have a look at all of them.
Oh,
I bet 100% of the time. Like all the straights are being bet. All the Broadway ones are being bet. Let's have a look at the 9. What does the 9 complete? The king 10. Like this. Okay, so yeah, so you got a flush draw here, or here, or here. Right, so they're still being bet quite a bit because once the straight comes in, the flush draw is the only thing that can beat the straight. Well, obviously sets can too, but the flush draw. Now the thing is, a lot of the flush draws are being used in larger size, so you have to note that these ones over here are almost being used in a larger size than using the small bet. The small bet call on the higher cards here, it's complete to straight. You're betting at quite a high frequency, but still, like the bet size being used is like a very small bet size, like betting 10% on the flop and then 10% on the turn. Is both interesting and annoying to face.
Mm-hmm.
So the 8-7 of clubs specifically was getting bet on the bigger size, right, for out of position?
So what was the question? A6?
The 8-7, sorry. 8-7 of clubs.
8-7. 8-7.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, what I mean, being bet to it's being potted half the time. So, and then the rest of it is like allocated a little bit, bits and pieces to the rest of the other sizes. Okay, so yeah, so the valor of say 8-7, right? So compared to ace king, where all the top pairs are going to basically win the hand for you, 8-7 doesn't have that luxury, and it doesn't even have any straight draws, has some backdoor like low straight draws, hoping that backdoor 10-9 doesn't do anything. So it was basically doesn't have any backdoor straight draws. So it's basically only a flush draw. So the pure flush draw without any backdoors, and it's like not a bad flush draw, but yeah. So the pure flush draw without any backdoors. Good hand semi bluff from up size, and then if you get jammed on, you can fold. So one of those things, right? You can pot it, and then if you get jammed on, you can fold.
Okay. So it doesn't have the pair draws going for it. That's why it prefers the bigger size, right?
It doesn't have the pair draws. Doesn't have any backdoor straight off, or doesn't have any backdoor straight draws either. This is like 7-6. This is like 7-6-6-5 has the backdoor straight draw going for it. So it can be allocated to the checking line. Also, mainly because it's like a weaker flush draw as well. Like if you look at a lot of sims, you'll see that just weaker draws on average go into the checking line. So 8-7 is like the strongest flush draw without any backdoors. So that's why it's being used in the big size.
Yeah.
Sorry, the strongest, weakest. It's kind of hard to say. Weakest flush draw with. I think you guys get what I mean, but people who are listening to this later are going to have no idea what I'm saying. It's like one of the best candidates to be using a large size. The weaker flush draws are too weak, because they're going to run the stronger flush draws too much. Yeah. And these very, very strong flush draws don't like getting jammed on, because they get jammed on. They kind of have to call.
Yeah. Is like a marginal call
in terms of EV? Not really. Well, 10% of the little over 15% of the pot, so it's probably not marginal. 2.5%, something like that, of the pot. So not a marginal call at all. But the weaker ones, yeah, they're always folded.
Oh, okay.
Anything weaker than the ace high flush draw. All right. Now you can think similarly with a king 10. So here, this is backwards to the way that it would be in a single raise pot, or if the SPR was a lot deeper. Here, king 10 with a club is being used in the smaller sizes, and king 10 without clubs is being used in the bigger sizes, right? And it's got to do with what happens when you get jammed, right? Then you can fold. Here with a club, it's calling, and pretty sad about that. Or here and then jam, and then king 10 folds, right? It's not just that, because the jam is only happening a few percent of the time, right?
Yeah.
But here being out of position versus being in position. So here checking, there's no king 10 off. Here in position when it's with the clubs. Actually, it would be more interesting if I had king 10 off. Yeah, let's look at ace 10. Yes, ace 10 with a club versus ace 10 without any clubs. So ace 10 with a club is being bet at quite a high frequency, versus here ace 10. You can see it's difficult to see, but being bet slightly more without a club.
No, I can see it. Yeah.
Right. And being bet slightly more for bigger sizes. So we can have a look at, say, a big size. So say it goes pot, and then like there's a brick. It goes call, and there's a brick. All right. You can keep betting, but there's a lot of it's interesting. Like there's 75 chips left, and in this sim it puts half the stack in, instead of jamming. So like preferred size is half the stack, and then like anyway. So you'll see some weird stuff like that a lot. It's weird in the sense that humans don't do it very often. They would just like jam because it's a pot size bet, or 1.5 times pot size bet, versus putting in 75% pot bet and only have like half left, and then like when they call, the pot is 127, and then your stack is 36. Yeah, Sims do stuff which humans don't, and so you should be looking out for stuff like this,
Yeah,
where you
sure.
put in almost your entire stack, but not your entire stack, and then it ends up being slightly better than the other options.
What does it fold when it bets and the guy raises? He raises a lot.
It folds like,
Oh, you're just like airballs.
yeah, basically airballs.
You get fold. Are the ace? Yeah. Are the ace 7, ace 3, are those flush draws? Or no, not flush draws, right?
No,
Yeah. Okay, yeah. We start to fold those.
but all the flush draws, because like you put so much in, and then I would say it goes with pretty low frequency.
There's a check.
Anyway, so where was I? With ace 10, yeah. So ace 10, okay, so it's being bet all the time. But out of position, it goes check, and now say a small bet, and then fold, right? So a lot of it with ace 10 out of position versus in position, it's going to end up being folded a bit. The ace 10 after it calls, and then the turn is a brick. You can just check fold. Versus if it was with a club, you really don't want that as much, because you want to be able to see both cards in order to make your flush. Right? So say it goes pot and now it's a club. Okay. Obviously, ace 10 of clubs is going to continue. Ace 10 with a club is going to continue because of its extra equity, but then it goes check, and then bet, and then all everything without a club is folded. Now versus the smaller size, so you use the small size, right? And then it's a brick. Okay, it will still continue, and then when the club comes, right? Say it's a small size again, and say a club comes, 2 clubs on the river, it can be used as a bluff.
That's a pot size. Okay. Well, how come? Does it have any enough flush draws in this line? Oh yeah, that's interesting. I thought there would be like a jamming range here.
Out of position doesn't jam as much as in position does. So in position here you would have some jams, but
Oh.
usually the way it works is that out of position has to use a bunch of smaller bet sizes than in position does, and you'll see that a lot, especially in like 3-bet pots. A lot of these small bet sizes were being used for out of position, and then in position just didn't do that. Didn't use a small bet size at all. Say check, right? No small bet size.
Yeah. But I guess the small bets, like in position raises them so aggressively, it's like better. It's like because like it makes up for not jamming, right? If you like bet 10%, 10%, 10%, like is in position going to jam like 20% of the time or something? Or like if you like bet 10% flop turn and then
It's 10% brick, 10%,
and then the club,
and the club.
and then if you bet like 10% again, how often does he jam?
5% of the time.
Okay, but he raises pretty often too, I guess, right? He raises like 30. He raises like 30%. Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
I mean, like, remember what's the difference between betting 10% and checking? Like, not a lot.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So if you check and they would bet 30%, like, is that so much crazier than if you bet very small and they raise 30%?
Yeah.
Not really, right?
Yeah.
Also, if you think about it exploitatively, if you bet very small, some people just don't like raising, but they like betting if you check, so you can do weird stuff.
I would be pretty passive against these two, probably. I wouldn't be that as aggressive. Like it's raising some weird hand, like the ace jack. I wouldn't raise that. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, ace jack, but ace jack's got
The value bet.
Yeah, 80% equity. It's one of those things where you sort of have to assume that your opponent is splitting sizes, right? Because like if your opponent was using like 10% pot bets through streets with their entire betting range, they would be hemorrhaging chips with that strategy. So you have to play against it as if they had split their size somewhere. So that's why playing again, reading these like large sims, learning these large sims and how to play against these small bets and using them yourself is pretty good. If you assume that your opponent was using 10% on each street and you run a sim like that, yeah, okay, ace jack might not be a raise there because they have all like the queen x still. But in the small size here, it's a good mix of stuff, but a lot of it you can see a good chunk is like middle pair, bottom pair, like a jack x, and then weaker. So then if you have ace jack, you're sitting. You can see you're sitting ace jack is sort of here in the range, right? This is the entire range. This is the bluffs like down here, like this is like the thin value stuff, and now this is where ace jack is. So ace jack beats all of this.
Yeah.
And so you would expect if you did a small raise that this much would call and then this much beats you. And then you feel sad about that because they're going to raise and some of these are going to bluff raise. But ace jack can still be a value raise. So betting small. Unfortunately, this is only half pot raise. Then you could probably make it even smaller raise. But say a half pot raise, the pot is 26. Half pot raise, and then you get jammed on. Now you're indifferent. But that doesn't mean that your raise was bad. Just because you got jammed on and you're indifferent now, that doesn't mean that your raise was bad.
Yeah,
your raise was fine. Just because they're betting a whole bunch of weaker hands, weak jack x and stuff. Yeah. All right, so small bet, small bet, small bet. So yeah, in 3-0 pots, you got to get used to using that kind of stuff. So yeah, back to Valor. Where was I with Valor? All right, so using Valor to analyze these kinds of hands. So we talked about nines. We talked about the ace king, the ace 10, king 10. Now, did the two sims that I ran help illustrate the difference in terms of Valor and stack depth?
Yeah.
Like Kane's example and your example, like the boards actually aren't too different.
Yeah.
Okay, and the spot and the ranges themselves aren't too different, but because of the different SPR, there's quite a big difference in the strategy between the two players. Right here, this range is even stronger than this. There's a bigger difference between these two ranges because of the SPR. Our position checks a lot more when the SPR is deep versus when the SPR is shallow.
Yeah. I have a question if you don't mind.
Yep.
If you bet 10% 3 times, if you bet like something like ace 10, does it ever happen like he folds on the river? Does he ever like fold a worse hand and call does he ever like fold a better hand but call a worse hand? No, right? Like in a 10% pot bet, I'm just it's kind of like
here ace 10 isn't being used for that. I don't think.
Like, does it ever happen in 10% pot bet?
Yeah, there's a little bit of ace 10. Yeah, I mean that is definitely a bluff, but they do call with their own ace 10.
They'll never. On the river. I'm just like wondering because it's so small. Like you'll never. But on the river because it's on the river, right? So it'll never fold a worse hand. Right? It'll never fold a worse hand by call by worse, right?
Fold better and call a worse.
Yeah. That never happens, right? Does it ever happen?
Okay, so here, if you bet 10% again, If you look at this, like this is where the equity drops between weak pair and then ace high, and the strongest ace high is ace 10, and it's very, very low frequency, so it could just be error in the tree. Putting it there, okay, and that might be the case, but definitely say ace 9, right, which is the one below that, which happens quite some of the time. Say ace 9, right? You bet ace 9, and then they fold everything weaker than ace 9, and then anything. Well, they fold a little bit about ace 10.
Oh, okay.
Weaker pairs, but they never call with a hand weaker than ace 9.
Okay. Yeah, that answers my question. Yeah.
I mean, they can definitely raise hands weaker than.
But they would never.
Ace 9 but to be fair, ace 9, your ace 9 was ace 9 of diamonds, so they wouldn't have ace 9 of diamonds. Yeah, so they can raise weaker hands.
It never calls. Yeah.
But never call.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's it. That answers my question. Yeah, that's pretty good.
All right. Okay. So on that note, so the weakest. So if you look at this equity distribution, the weakest. So the strongest bluff. Right. If you look at the range of hands which bets at any size, the strongest bluff is here in this run out bottom pair ace 2, right? If you can think of that as a bluff, you have that larger size. So ace 2, ace 10, so basically sort of like ace high. So you would expect that against any bet, your opponent would fold hands bigger than ace high, right? So obviously against the smallest bet, because there isn't any of that in the range, they can call ace 10 some of the time. It's larger bet, all the ace high folds or raises. Larger bets, all the ace high folds, or uses as a bluff raise. The ace high folds, which is a bluff raise. So that goes to say that if your opponent's weakest, if your opponent's strongest bluff beats your hand, you can't call. You can bluff raise still.
Yeah. Right. But it's because like sometimes, But it's because like sometimes you know how you prefer like a weaker showdown value hand because it has like better blockers.
Yeah, so here ace 2 is probably doing that because it blocks the set of 2s.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's why I asked, because like sometimes I call like a weaker hand, but because it has a better blocker. So I wonder like if that ever would happen, but yeah, I guess not. It's fine. Yeah.
Oh, so if you're talking about it in terms of against these very small bets, if you're in position, you shouldn't call. So like if you had ace high, like you would, and your opponent took this line like min bet, you can just fold ace high.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
It might be different if the ranges were a lot wider, but even for single raise pots, I think it would be pretty similar. Where you would fold at least like the weaker portion of your ace high and call the stronger portion of your ace high.
Yeah.
The quarter pot, I'm guessing is going to be pretty similar to quarter pot, 10%. The quarter pot's easier to jam because jamming is a twice pot bet instead of a 4 times pot bet. But yeah, you can see that subtle difference in the SPR by the time it gets to the river between the two lines. So like 10%, and now a shove is 4 times the pot using 10%, but quarter pot gives you an SPR of 2 going to the river. So note that when you're trying to set up stacks, that there's actually having a small change in your bet size, even though it doesn't seem like a lot, can change the SPR by the river,
Mhm.
making different hands going to a different bet size. So shoving, here's a bluff, here's another bluff, value.
Yeah, the king
Yeah.
queen's preferred over the aces. That's interesting. The aces doesn't get jammed. I guess you block ace queen. I guess. But king queen blocks king queen. I don't know.
Well, king queen blocking king queen isn't too bad.
Yeah.
We're not blocking this stuff.
But yeah,
I think
the aces.
I think the aces blocking aces is a part of that. Right. So then betting half pot and then hoping to get jammed on. Well, not jammed on here, but raised. Is that half pot? No, quarter pot.
Well,
So quarter
yeah.
pot and then getting raised, and then you can jam aces. Because it's a pretty clean run out.
Yeah.
Another thing with aces is that here queen 10 is raised. I don't know if that's interesting to you guys. Queen 10, queen 9, queen 8, all the queens.
Yeah.
I don't know if, like, if someone bets quarter pot 3 times, I don't know if you'd be inclined to raise like top pair, bottom kicker type stuff.
No.
No.
Not previous to this. No way. No way. Like king
I'm just
queen.
happy to call it down.
King queen would be the one I'd be like maybe. Yeah. Oh, because I guess if you jam, they fold the king queen 8, right? Sometimes. Whereas if you do this, they can. Oh no! If you just open.
Well, you're turning your hand into a bluff, right?
If you just open jam, they fold the queen 8. I guess sometimes.
No, queen 8 always calls.
But I guess they're like bluffing when they raise, so you get the EV from the bluffs as well as all that stuff. Is it correct to say that?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. So you want to? So
like,
where are we?
So because if you bet the quarter pot, aces has higher EV in that because it gets raised more often than it gets called when you jam.
Yeah, so that's what's going on.
Yeah. Okay.
So like if your opponents aren't raising this thin, then obviously you should jam aces.
Yeah.
Right, because that way you guarantee that you get your opponent stacked from these hands. But here if you go quarter pot, you have to have your opponent raise these hands here in order to fully get your EV.
Also, like the pocket fives turning into a bluff, that's pretty crazy too. I wouldn't do that.
Well, if you're not raising these ones for
Yeah.
value, then like you probably don't need to have that as a bluff.
Yeah.
But you should look out for spots like this, or at least take advantage of spots like this in your opponents, right? Where they don't raise in a 3-bet pot when you bet small 3 times.
Yeah.
Right, because here if we look at the quarter pot range, here like in the sims, like looking at this like the jump in the color tells you where the value and where the bluff is on the river, right? There's a nice big jump in terms of the color. Here quarter pot, like it's sort of like gradual, but towards the end it's obviously a bluff. So you bet bigger, right here, big jump. So here this is sort of like the clear value-ish side, and here's sort of the bluff-ish side, and you can see it's like here's around like 35%, here's around 65%. Oh, we kind of have a bluff to value ratio of 2 to 1. Similar sort of thing, but here, right? So here, polarized, bigger jump, and then as you get smaller bet, like there's not as big of a jump. It's more sort of a smooth curve, and then it tapers out. Anyway, so where was I? Quarter pot, yeah. Quarter pot again. All right. Now in the quarter pot range, the weakest value here is King Jack.
Mm-hmm.
So against that, King Jack would always be called, which is what you would expect, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then Jack 10, Jack 9, Jack 8, they're always calls because they block some of the value. Yeah. And now tens, because it doesn't block any of the value and it's weaker than the value, it's indifferent. So you can see some of the principles that we have from Ace King Queen game, stuff like that.
I was going to say, yeah, it's a really good way of looking at it. And it also shows why this GTO Plus, for me, it's a much more flexible tool to use. It's all in one pane.
Yeah. And it's a lot easier to interpret after you've watched my game theory videos.
Yes.
Than if you're just looking at a whole bunch of weird colors and numbers and like what.
Yeah, that's why the theory is so important to get under your belt, because it all ties in.
Anyway, what was I? Yeah. So knowing that with the quarter pot, doesn't get to like Queen X. Where's Queen 10? Queen 10 is somewhere. Like, is there a tiny frequency, and then it goes to King Queen. But yeah, doesn't get to Queen X until like a big chunk of it. You can see that this big chunk of the quarter pot range is Jack X, and then only some of it is Queen X and stronger. So knowing that, if you see quarter pot, they're representing
Jack X. Yeah.
They're representing Jack X, so that's blocker betting you, right? So when you have a queen, okay, you can see, oh, they have Jack X, I'm going to raise. And then you just pot it. And then sometimes you get jammed on by a stronger hand, and that sucks to be you. But yeah, you can be indifferent now. But yeah, you raise, and then the Jack X.
It's indifferent. Yeah.
It's indifferent there.
I was also wondering, because you know how in position, if you bet and they don't raise you enough, you can bet thinner for value. That's true, right?
Yep. If you're in position, it's also true if you're out of position.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna ask that. Yeah. So I could also bet thinner here if they don't raise me enough, right? I could bet like more Jack X or something.
Yeah, well, you'd be betting mostly Jack X anyway. So here, Jack 9 is the indifferent one. Okay. But yeah, if your opponent wasn't doing those raises with the Queen X, then yeah, you could bet Jack 9. Because you don't have to worry about being bluffed off your hand.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, that's super cool.
It's good.
Maybe it's a bit more clear with 10%, quarter pot 10%. A lot more Jack X than that. Right, you can see like most of their range is just Jack X.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the Limit 01 Games Extended, which is like no one has seen that video, but
I've started to go through it. I get a bit bogged down in the math.
Good on you. Anyway, yeah, the graph at the end is really pretty. But yeah, you can do these blocker bets. Well, the common term for it is blocker bet, but it is a value bet. All these blocker bets are value bets. Blocker bet in Hold'em is different from blocker bet in PLO. Yeah. It's just really just a thin value bet.
Yeah.
Very thin for a small size, hoping that you don't get raised. And if your opponents don't raise you, then you can just do this a lot. Especially out of position.
Thomas, I got a different question on this. I don't know, is there some more points you want to make on this topic?
Not really. I'm just rambling now. Go ahead.
No. So on your earlier Valor module, you're talking about retaining Valor with bluffs or with draws, actually, and you mentioned in order to help maintain Valor with draws, it's you need to have bluffs so that when your draws improve, you can continue to bet. You know, you're able to bet for value on the subsequent streets. And I think it was pretty clear with a flush draw that you know, when the draw completes, you could continue betting for value, and you have bluffs like, for example, you know, the ace flush card, the king flush card is you know, could be part of your bluffing range. So that's very clear to me. What about draws like straight draws, and the straight draw completes after you bet, and you want to be able to continue betting for value when, you know, the straight draw completes? I'm just curious what the bluffs look like there. And I think I was wondering if Catenson might be a better one, because I think the ranks of the cards are a bit lower. Does my question make sense?
Out of position, in position. We can look at in position first, I guess. Yeah, so straight draws. The good thing about straight draws is there's a whole bunch of them. Especially on this flop, there's also flush draws and straight draws. So when the flush draw completes, you can bluff a straight draw or a heart blocker. But a lot of the time, you can complete a straight draw, and that completes one of the. It makes a pair for one of your straight draws. But a lot of the time, you're going to be betting a variety of hands, like just ace high. Yeah, ace high with a heart. Right. Remember that ace high is 3 outs. Okay, so here if you got ace jack, ace of hearts jack, 3 outs with the ace, to a decent hand, 3 outs with the jack to a mediocre hand, and then I guess you can count it as 1 out, which is sort of where the math for a backdoor flush draw with the ace of hearts. But in reality, it's a lot more than that, because you get to see the turn, and you don't have to bluff it if you miss. You can see the turn as a heart, and then continue to bluff again, knowing that your equity's gone up. So like if that's sort of where it's going to be. Overcard type hands, just like a lot of these here being bet. So here, king 2, king 3, king 4, king 5, ace 2, ace 3. Like, don't underestimate how good these hands in the top right are as bluffs. You'll see them a lot being used as bluffs in single raise pots. Here in your hand, because check, hands in the top right, because there's just one over, one under, and 1 over, 1 under means you have 3 outs from the over. The under doesn't matter too much when you're doing it, and you don't have too much equity that you would be sad if you got raised, because you can just fold.
But on this Queen 9-6 board, if you bet in position, and let's say the you know, the turn card comes 8 of spades, right? So you complete you know, the Jack 10 flush, Jack 10 straight, right? So you bet call. I mean, it's check bet call, and a turn comes 8 of spades, for example.
Pot size bet, and you're continuing. But
right.
remember,
what are the bluffs? So what are the bluffs that you're bringing along with your straights in order to retain valor, so that you continue betting your straights? I guess that's what I was trying to understand.
Okay. Yep.
It's obvious for me with the flush. You know, it's the ace of hearts, king of heart, X type hands that, you know, can go along as bluffs.
Okay, so this is sort of where this thing here becomes pretty good.
Right, okay.
Pot size bet. So you can see towards the end here that these are all the bluffs which you have when you're betting. Maybe if you look at it like this, a bit better. Towards the right here, the low equity stuff and the high equity stuff. Obviously, the straight
so that
is the high equity.
So
and then
yeah,
towards,
so that
the middle,
actually,
you want to have some middling hands, right? So here, like a queen jack might pot it and then check back the river. 10-8, right? Same sort of deal. Potting it as a center bluff, right? He got a weak pair and he got shot.
I like that king 10 you were showing, because that's drawing to a better straight, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's a hand you can bluff with. You know, I'm not necessarily thinking of the hands that are drawing to a flush, but you know, ones that could be drawing to a better straight. King of Hearts, 10 of Diamonds.
Yeah, obviously anything that's going to be drawing to a better straight is a really good candidate if there's no flush draw. Right, you can think about it here. If instead of an 8, it was a jack, right, where there's a straight. On the 10, remember, on connected boards, unless it's a Broadway, there's always going to be a redraw somewhere. So you can use the redraw
As a bluff, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
well as a draw bluff, but you can also just turn junk into bluffs. So don't be afraid of doing that.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, depending on your bet size and depending on how capped villain's range appears to be. Yeah.
If you need hands to bluff, just 5-4, just junk as a bluff. 5 high. Pocket pairs, I don't know if you'd be interested in that.
Oh yeah, those are
You use a bluff.
those are the bread and butter.
Pocket pairs are pretty. Like the Valor is actually not too bad because here you bet. If you bet, check, bet. King 10 don't have a lot of it, but they're going to be raising most of it. And like a lot of people don't think of pocket pairs as a draw, but it's still a 2-out draw to a set. And so that's pretty damn strong hand. So is there that much difference between 2 outs for a set and 4 outs for a gut shot? I mean,
Yeah, not
the difference is 2 outs, like not too much in the grand scheme of things, right? But also like the 2 outs for your pocket pair also has some showdown value, which makes it more difficult for your opponent to call at a position with ace high. So
yeah.
you can get value out of that. So that's another brick, like a 4 check. Well, that's being bet all the time as a bluff, but yeah, even if you checked it, right, you would still be winning against those ace highs, which they have some of the time.
All right, that's good.
So your opponent has to be out of position when they're out of position. They have to be pretty good in terms of their range construction in order for you to not be able to bluff these pocket pairs when we need to, and getting value against them at the same time.
No, that's good. What you're doing there, where you're just kind of hovering over the bar at the bottom of the table there. That's actually really good for being able to see where your bluffs are and the equities. I wasn't doing that before. That's actually very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see like there's always like a little bit of a jump, and the jump is very obvious when it gets through. Check, call, check. Right, so obvious there.
Yeah,
so that's obvious on the earlier screens, right? This is value and this is bluffs. You don't have to like think. You don't have to think anymore, right?
Ace, king, queen.
It tells you what the weakest value bet is.
Yeah.
Yeah, ace, queen, king, queen, and then tells you what the strongest bluff is. 10-9, being used at a small frequency.
Yeah, Thomas, I had a question. Or Tom, George, you want to go first?
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
Okay. I was wondering, on the flop, if it goes check, back, call, and the turn's a 8, right? Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, 8. And then the king 10 is like mixed between like betting and checking. So can I say like king 10? If I check and hit my straight, they'll call me more often. Whereas if I bet and hit my straight, is that something that's worth noting or no? The king 10, I guess. Yeah. Because if
So
you
it's a lot less mixed than you'd think. King 10 with a heart being bet because blockers
You
to a flush draw, and you can bluff again if the flush comes, and you still hit and you still miss. King 10 of diamonds, clubs, and spades don't block as much of your opponent's King 10,
hmm
which would fold.
hmm
King 10 and other stuff that would fold, right? Because having blockers to two different suited hands,
yeah,
right, is different from blocking only one different suited hand. And that's also another thing for like pre-flop, right? Like people dislike these offsuit hands, these offsuit Broadway hands, but like offsuit Broadway hands, they double block the pocket pairs. Yeah, that's one thing, but they also block twice as much suited Broadways, which your opponent would continue with as well, compared to like suited stuff where it doesn't block anything. But like King Jack off double blocks suited Broadway hands, which like to continue.
Okay.
That was quite a digression. Anyway, where was I?
Oh, it's a check by call on the flop.
Typical.
Yeah.
So same sort of deal.
Mhm.
King 10. Like if you bet, right? King 10 is folding.
Mhm.
So do you want to block hands that fold? Probably not.
Yeah. But does the hitting the straight when you check, does that have any? Is that like a big thing to think about, or it's like whatever?
Yeah. So that's an important part. Well, imposition is not as big of a deal between the two. But say you check your king or your King 10.
Mm-hmm. Did they go crazy on a jack or something? Not. No.
Obviously, they're going to have King 10 and some basically all of their straights with a 10, but a lot of your jack X bet the previous straight.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, 10x. My bad. What am I saying? 10x. Probably not as big of a deal as this sim says. Like if had a bigger sim, might split sizes on the turn, on a specific turn card, right? If had like more sizes to use. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I'm not sure.
No, I think it's like.
No, I think you. I mean, from my perspective, you
Like
answered
I
my.
don't think there's a lot of difference. It's just some subtle blocker stuff, which
Okay. Yeah. No, that's fine.
I think mainly it's because of the blocker effect against your opponent's King 10.
Mm-hmm.
Like here, you got King 10.
Yeah, that's probably the main thing. Yeah.
Double blocking your opponent's King 10 versus King 10 of diamonds only single blocks it, so they fold slightly more when you have King 10.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That answers it. Yeah.
All right.
I'm good, Thomas. I got out of this what I wanted. I thought it was really good. I'm going to have to leave in a few minutes.
All right. That's good. Okay. So just going back over what I was hoping you guys would learn. All right. You guys happy about the factors influencing Valor?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get talk too much about multi-way, but mainly stack depth and position.
Yeah.
You see how they're pretty important. And now we also analyze some hand histories, whether it's made it easier for you to analyze hands or just made it a lot more difficult because you have more to think about now. I don't know. Maybe you just need some practice because like there's the way of thinking where, well, the way you're currently thinking versus trying to augment that by adding more bits to it, right? Obviously, you're going to be slower to start off with, but think about the way that you think about hands now, and then compare that to like 6 months ago or a year ago, right?
Yeah.
Like how much better and faster are you about thinking about how the hand is now compared to then?
Yeah.
Same sort of thing, right? Adding more tools to your tool belt. You already know how to use the old tools. It takes you a bit of time to learn how to use the new ones. So you can think about Valor as a tool. Some other stuff, trying to think ahead at least one straight, right? Trying to think ahead about which turns are going to be good for you, which turns are going to be bad for you, and also thinking about all the options that you have in this street.
Yeah.
Right, and how that would affect the value of your hand. So that might be a good way to start. So what do I think my valor is in terms of like a thought process? What do I think my valor is now? If I bet and they call, what's going to happen to my valor? If I bet and they raise, what's going to happen to my valor? If I check and I call, what's going to happen to my valor? And if I check and they check, what's going to happen to my valor? And those valor changes being offset by how much your opponent is being put, how many chips your opponent is putting into the pot. Right. So you can think about it as George's term, spending valor, right? So you spend it by betting, you check and your opponent bets for you, and so your valor decreases in that way, but your opponent's put chips in the pot for you. Or if it goes check, then your valor goes up with these strong hands. Or if you have a very, very strong hand, you can check with the intention of raising.
One of the ways I find it, for me, it's easy to kind of integrate these new concepts without feeling I'm under the time clock when I'm playing online is I'll jump over to Snowy and just go through a few hundred hands and just, at each decision point, just kind of think through the different outcomes and just do it over and over again until it starts to feel comfortable. And then I'll do a bit of it online and see how it works when I'm under time pressure.
Yeah, that's good. That's definitely a good way to think about it. A lot of it is thinking about it and looking at sims offline. Like if you look at one sim, right? So what we've done here, so we look at one sim and we sort of have done the equivalent of playing like 1,000 hands. Right. It's not only 1,000 hands, it's only 200 different combinations, but we looked at some different parts of the tree. And so we know for this board and similar boards how to play it because we've not only essentially played the hand, right? We've also learned how to play it correctly, or hopefully, right? So studying all the sims is more time efficient for learning than playing a whole bunch of hands. But if you don't play a whole bunch of hands, you don't have your thought processes on the table ironed out as well. So, like if you're an absolute, think about this way, like if you're an absolute beginner at playing the piano, right? So much of your time would just be spent in front of the piano, hammering away, right? But then if you're like an expert, or if you're really good at playing the piano, a lot more of your time will be spent just like reading music off a sheet and thinking about it in your head, rather than playing it in front of you, unless you were obviously practicing for a recital or something like that. But you kind of get what I mean. As you move up, you get more time efficiency in terms of study by studying what's good instead of repeating the same mistakes that you're making
over and over again
by playing. Yeah. That's. I'll upload the extra sims to the library.
Thank you. That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you guys can go through them. All right. Any last minute questions? Otherwise, I'll call it a day.
No, I'm good. Thank you very much, Thomas.
Thank you. That was really good. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
All right. See you guys.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. See you later.
Thank you.